When I turned 65, I thought I had my life figured out. My days were quiet, filled with the comfort of routine and the joy of knowing that I had a small but secure circle of people who I could trust. Little did I know that all of it was about to come crashing down around me. It all started when I invited Rachel, my best friend of over 20 years, to dinner. I had spent weeks preparing my best dishes, wanting to make her feel special. We had shared so many memories together, from late-night talks to weekend getaways, and I had always considered her family. But that night, something felt off. As we sat down to eat, Rachel was unusually quiet, her eyes darting around as if she was hiding something. I noticed at first when she avoided my gaze, then again when she hesitated to answer simple questions. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, I found a folder tucked away in her purse. I didn't mean to snoop, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. There, in black and white, was a bank statement showing a large withdrawal from my savings account. My savings account. The same account I had worked tirelessly to build over the years, the one I had been so careful with. I couldn't believe it. Rachel, the woman I had trusted with everything, had taken it. It was like a punch to the gut. She had stolen my life savings, and I was left with nothing but the haunting question of why. Why would she do this? I had always been there for her, supporting her through thick and thin. She had even stayed at my house during difficult times, and now this? The betrayal was so deep, it cut through me like a knife. I had to confront her. I needed answers. But at the same time, I was terrified of what the truth would reveal. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, unable to shake the image of the bank statement from my mind. The next morning, I called my bank to confirm the withdrawal. They told me that the transfer had been processed with the correct signature, but they couldn't tell me who had authorized it. That's when I knew I had to act fast. I wasn't going to let Rachel get away with this. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, could never be repaired. I needed to find out everything. What else had Rachel been hiding? And most importantly, what was her secret stash? I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was the beginning of a battle that would change everything. I wasn't going to let Rachel win. And I wasn't going to let her take what was mine. The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog. Every time I looked at Rachel, I saw a stranger. The woman who had been my closest friend for so long now felt like a distant memory, a ghost of the person I thought I knew. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe there was an explanation, something I hadn't seen or understood. But deep down, I knew the truth. Rachel had taken my money, and she hadn't even tried to hide it. The betrayal was too great to ignore. I couldn't just pretend everything was okay anymore. I had to find out what else she had been hiding. I began going through every conversation we had ever had, every detail of our friendship. My mind replayed our years together like a movie, but now it was filled with doubt. Had she been deceiving me all along? I couldn't believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more I saw the signs. She had always been careful with money, but I had never thought much of it. She'd always been the type to keep things tidy, to make sure everything was in its place, but maybe she'd been hiding more than I realized. I started to question everything. When did it all start? When had Rachel decided to cross the line? I had no idea, but I was determined to find out. I spent hours going over my bank statements, comparing dates, amounts, everything that might give me a clue. I remembered that Rachel had always been curious about my finances, often asking about my savings or how much I had saved for retirement. She seemed genuinely interested in my well-being, always offering advice about how I could make my money work better for me. But now, I couldn't help but wonder if she was just gathering information to steal from me. The thought made my stomach turn. I couldn't believe I had been so blind, so trusting. As I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the piles of papers in front of me, the phone rang. It was Rachel. Her voice sounded normal, but I could hear the faint edge of tension beneath her words. "Hey Maggie, I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee tomorrow. I know it's been a while since we've had a proper catch-up." I felt my heart skip a beat. Was this her way of trying to make things right? Or was it just another attempt to manipulate me into thinking everything was fine? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. "Sure, Rachel. Let's meet. I'll be at the usual spot at 10, I said, my voice steady even though my mind was racing. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I had to face her. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, my nerves making my hands shake as I wrapped them around my cup. Rachel walked in a few minutes later, her smile as bright as ever, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She sat down across from me, her posture stiff. "So, how have you been, Maggie?" she asked, her voice too light, too casual. I took a deep breath, then said, "I've been better, Rachel. There's something I need to talk to you about." Her smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "What's going on?" I met her gaze, my voice cold. "I know about the money, Rachel. I know what you did." The words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Rachel's face went pale. For a moment, she didn't speak, her eyes darting around as if looking for a way out. Finally, she spoke, but her voice was trembling. "Maggie, I can explain. It wasn't what you think." I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. "Explain? Explain how you took everything I worked for? You don't get to explain that away, Rachel. You betrayed me, and now you have to face the consequences." She looked down, her hands fidgeting. Nervously, "I'm sorry, Maggie. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do." I shook my head, my heart pounding. "You didn't know what else to do? You thought stealing from me was the solution? Do you even understand how much I trusted you?" Rachel's eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt angry, angrier than I had ever felt in my life. "I trusted you, Rachel. You were my best friend. And you took everything from me. How could you do that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, wiping her eyes. The silence between us was thick, uncomfortable. Finally, I stood up. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Rachel, but this is over. You don't get to come back into my life after what you've done." She reached out, her voice pleading. "Maggie, please, don't do this. I made a mistake. I'll make it right." I shook my head again, my resolve hardening. "No, Rachel. It's too late for that." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I had known Rachel for so long, trusted her with everything, and yet here I was, standing in the ruins of that trust. It felt like a betrayal not just of money, but of everything we had shared. But now it was over. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to let her steal my peace of mind, my trust, my life. Rachel had crossed the line, and I was done being a victim. The days after I confronted Rachel were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation, about how easily she had denied everything, how calm and collected she seemed despite the damage she had done. It was as though nothing had changed for her. But I knew better. I knew it was only a matter of time before her true intentions would be revealed. I didn't waste any more time feeling sorry for myself. I had a plan. Rachel might think she had gotten away with it, but I was going to make sure she didn't. I spent the next few days researching everything I could. I needed to know exactly what she had taken, how much, and where it had gone. I made calls to my bank, requesting every transaction and every detail of my account. They were reluctant to give me any more information, but eventually, they agreed to help. The records I received were shocking. Rachel had taken not just the money I had noticed, but far more. There were multiple withdrawals, hidden transfers, and strange accounts in my name that I had never opened. It became clear that Rachel had been planning this for a long time. She had not just stolen money. She had manipulated the system to make sure I wouldn't notice. It was a betrayal beyond what I could have imagined. I couldn't believe how far she had gone to deceive me. Every time I thought I understood the extent of her actions, I found something else. It was like peeling back layers of a story I never wanted to hear, but had to. But now, I had the information I needed. It was time to act. I called my lawyer, asking for advice on what steps I should take. They recommended that I get a full financial audit and make sure all my accounts were secure. I also needed to report the theft to the authorities. It was going to be a long process, but I wasn't going to let Rachel get away with it. As I worked through the steps, I found myself feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to demand answers. But another part of me knew that the damage was already done. Rachel had shown me who she really was, and there was no going back. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I couldn't let her back into my life, no matter how much she tried to manipulate me. After several weeks of handling the legal and financial aspects, I finally felt like I was taking control again. I had secured my accounts, filed the necessary reports, and made sure that Rachel could never touch my money again. But the emotional toll it had taken on me was another matter. Every time I thought about what she had done, the anger would rise up in me. How could someone I had trusted so completely betray me so thoroughly? But I knew I couldn't let that anger consume me. I had to move forward. One morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table, going over some papers, when my phone rang. It was Rachel. I didn't want to answer it, but I knew I had to. She had been sending me messages and emails, all of them apologizing, begging me to forgive her, asking if we could start over. She even tried to come by my house, but I had refused to let her in. I wasn't ready to face her yet. But now, on the phone, I could tell she was desperate. "Maggie, please, I know what I did was wrong." Rachel's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Can we please talk about this?" I took a deep breath before answering, trying to keep my voice steady. "Rachel, there's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice, and I made mine. You took something that didn't belong to you, and there's no going back from that." I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. "Please, Maggie, I need you. I can't do this without you. I'll do anything to make it right." But I wasn't moved. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. "It's too late for that, Rachel," I said, my voice cold. "You've already shown me who you are, and I can't trust you anymore. Goodbye." And with that, I ended the call. I knew it would be hard to move on, but I also knew it was the right decision. Rachel had taken everything from me, but she hadn't taken my strength. I was going to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let her be a part of it anymore. The days after the call with Rachel felt oddly peaceful. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, yet a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. I had made the decision to cut her out of my life, but the fallout from the betrayal lingered in the corners of my mind. The financial damage was something I could fix, eventually, but the emotional scars? Those would take time to heal. I started spending more time on things I had neglected for so long: gardening, reading, and even reconnecting with old friends who I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't easy, but I found small joys in the routine of life. One afternoon, as I was tending to my flowers, I got a call from my lawyer. They had made progress on the legal front and found some discrepancies in the paperwork Rachel had filed with the bank. Apparently, there were more accounts in my name that I hadn't been aware of. Some of the accounts had large sums of money that had been moved around, but the transfers were suspiciously timed. It was becoming clear that Rachel had been orchestrating this for a while. The thought made me sick to my stomach. My lawyer explained that it wasn't just a case of theft. This was fraud. It was more than I had imagined. I hadn't realized how deep her actions ran, and it made my skin crawl to think about it. But there was no turning back now. I had already made the decision to fight for what was rightfully mine. It felt good to have control again. As the investigation continued, I noticed Rachel's calls became less frequent, and the messages stopped altogether. It was as if she had disappeared. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, wondering when she would pop up again with another excuse, another apology. I started focusing on myself, on rebuilding my life the way I wanted. I took long walks in the park, enjoyed the peacefulness of being alone, and learned to appreciate my own company again. The quietness of the house, which had once felt empty and lonely, now felt comforting. I wasn't sure if I would ever trust someone the way I trusted Rachel, but I knew one thing: I was stronger than I had been before. I had faced the hardest betrayal of my life, and I was still standing. Months passed, and life started to feel normal again. I had put the financial mess behind me, and I was moving forward, step by step. I began to meet new people, not out of desperation, but because I wanted to. I wasn't waiting for anyone to save me anymore. I had learned how to save myself. One evening, I sat down at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything that had happened. I still couldn't fully understand why Rachel had done what she did. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. The lessons I had learned from the experience were far more valuable than the money Rachel had stolen. I had learned that trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. But more importantly, I had learned that I could survive without it. I didn't need anyone's approval or validation. I was enough just as I was. As I sat there, the phone rang again. This time, it was my son. I picked up, ready to tell him about everything that had happened, ready to share the story of how I had taken back my life. But before I could say anything, he spoke. "Mom, I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I know things have been tough, but you've handled everything so well. I don't think I've ever told you that, but I want you to know." His words hit me like a wave, and I realized then that I had done the right thing. I had fought for myself, and even though it had been painful, I had come out on the other side stronger. As I set down the phone, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had found my peace. Rachel could never take that from me. The weeks that followed brought a strange sense of calm, but it wasn't the peace I had hoped for. Rachel's absence left a hole, but it wasn't the kind I was used to. There was no chaos, no drama, but there was also no closure. I had moved on from the betrayal, yes, but the pieces of the story still lingered in the back of my mind. I found myself replaying every detail over and over, asking myself if I had missed any signs. The question that haunted me was simple. Why had she done it? Was it greed, revenge, or something else entirely? I wasn't sure if I would ever get the answers, but I had learned to live with the uncertainty. I had made peace with the fact that Rachel was never going to apologize, never going to take responsibility for her actions. But as time passed, I realized that I didn't need her apology. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. I needed to let go of the anger that had been holding me hostage. It wasn't easy. Some days the hurt would resurface, but I kept reminding myself that I had a life to rebuild, and I couldn't waste any more time focusing on someone who wasn't worth it. One afternoon, while I was out for a walk, I ran into an old acquaintance, a woman I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Karen, and we used to work together at a small publishing house. We exchanged pleasantries and caught up for a few minutes. It felt good to talk to someone new, someone who didn't know anything about my past, someone who could just see me for who I was now. As we said goodbye, Karen smiled and said, "You seem different, Maggie. There's a strength about you now that wasn't there before." Her words stuck with me long after our conversation ended. I had never thought of myself as strong. I had always been the person who took care of others, who put others first. But now, I was starting to see myself differently. I had been through so much and had come out the other side, stronger and wiser. It wasn't just about surviving the betrayal. It was about finding my own voice again. I realized that I was more than just the sum of my experiences. I wasn't defined by what Rachel had done to me, or by the money I had lost. I was defined by how I chose to move forward. A few months later, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, going through old photographs. I smiled as I looked at pictures of my younger self, the woman I used to be, the woman who had trusted so easily, who had believed the best in people. I missed her in some ways, but I also knew that I was no longer her. I was someone new, someone who had learned from her mistakes and was stronger because of them. It was around this time that I began to feel the itch to do something new. I had always loved writing, but it had been years since I had written anything for myself. I started small, jotting down ideas, writing short stories about the experiences I had gone through. At first, it was just for me. But then, as I continued to write, I realized that I had something worth sharing. I had a story that could help others who were going through similar struggles. So, I started a blog. It was a simple thing at first, just a place for me to put my thoughts down. But as I shared more of my story, I began to receive messages from people who had been through similar betrayals. They thanked me for being honest, for showing them that it was possible to heal. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect my words to reach anyone, but they did. And with each message I received, I felt a little more whole, a little more sure of myself. One day, a publisher reached out to me, asking if I would consider writing a book about my experiences. I was shocked, to say the least. A book? Me? But as I thought about it, I realized that it was the perfect way to close the chapter on that part of my life. To tell my story, not just for me, but for others who needed to hear it. So I agreed. Writing the book wasn't easy. It brought up painful memories, and at times, it felt like I was reliving everything all over again. But with every word I wrote, I felt more in control of my story. And in the end, it wasn't just about the book. It was about the journey I had taken to get here. The journey from betrayal to empowerment. I had lost a lot along the way. Money, trust, and a friendship that I thought would last forever. But I had gained so much more. I had gained my independence, my strength, and most importantly, my peace. As I finished the last chapter of my book, I smiled to myself. It wasn't the ending I had imagined, but it was the one I needed. I was no longer the person who had been betrayed. I was the person who had survived. And that was enough. It had been 6 months since I started my journey of reclaiming my life, and while things had settled down, I couldn't help but feel like I was still waiting for something to shift, some final moment that would close this chapter for good. I had written the book, gotten positive feedback, and even began public speaking, sharing my story with groups of people who were just as hurt and betrayed as I once was. It felt fulfilling, but a part of me felt like I hadn't truly found closure. One evening, as I sat at my desk sorting through some old papers, I came across a letter I had forgotten about. It was from Rachel, dated just a few weeks after everything had gone down. She had never sent it, and I had never seen it before. The envelope was slightly crumpled, as though it had been thrown away in frustration and then retrieved. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The handwriting on the page was familiar, but it felt distant now, like reading the words of a stranger. Maggie, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I'm writing this because I feel like I owe you something. What I did was unforgivable, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I wish I could take back the hurt I caused you, but I know that's impossible. All I can do now is apologize, truly, and from the bottom of my heart. You were always there for me, and I took advantage of that. I was selfish, and I don't expect anything from you. But if you can, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday. The words hit me harder than I had anticipated. They were simple, but there was something raw in them, something real that I hadn't expected from Rachel. For a moment, I just stared at the letter, trying to process it. Was this apology enough? Did it even matter anymore? I had long since accepted that Rachel would never truly understand the extent of her betrayal, that no apology could take away the years of trust she had stolen. But as I read her words again, something inside me shifted. I realized that the apology wasn't for me. It was for her. Rachel needed to say those words to unburden herself, and maybe that was all it was ever going to be. I had already let go of the anger, of the pain. I had already moved forward. Her apology, though long overdue, didn't change that. What it did change was my perspective on closure. I had been waiting for something to make it all feel right again. But maybe the truth was that closure doesn't come from other people. It comes from within. I had already healed myself. Rachel's letter didn't change my past, but it gave me the last piece of the puzzle I had been searching for. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. The next morning, I placed the letter in a box with everything else that represented my past with Rachel. I didn't need to keep it, but I didn't need to destroy it either. It was just another memory, one of many, that had helped shape who I was today. I wasn't defined by Rachel's betrayal. I wasn't defined by the money she took. I was defined by how I chose to move forward. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, but it was exactly what I needed. I had let go of the past, and I was ready to continue building my future. The days after that felt lighter. I found new passions, new projects that excited me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely in control of my life. I had survived the storm, and now I was walking towards a brighter future. And that, I realized, was the true victory. It wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had gained, my peace, my strength, and my ability to keep moving forward no matter what life threw at me. Months had passed since I received Rachel's letter, and yet, the process of truly letting go felt ongoing. I had made peace with the situation, and my life was moving forward in a way I hadn't thought possible. But there was still one thing left to settle, one last step I needed to take. I had spent years focused on what Rachel had done to me, but now, I realized that my journey was about something more. It was about me. It was about finding a new purpose, a new path that didn't involve my past with Rachel. I had stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next shoe to drop, and that freedom was liberating. I had discovered so much about myself during this time. I wasn't the woman who let others define her anymore. I was stronger, more resilient, and I finally realized that I could create my own future. One morning, I woke up with a thought that had been lingering in the back of my mind for weeks. I wanted to travel. Not just the weekend trips I had taken in the past, but something more significant. A journey that would take me outside of my comfort zone. I had always wanted to visit the West Coast, to see the Pacific Ocean and explore the beautiful landscapes of California. But I had never taken the time to do it. Life always seemed to get in the way. Now, I had no excuse. I had the time, the resources, and most importantly, the desire. The idea of traveling felt like the perfect way to close this chapter of my life. It wasn't just about the places I would visit, but about taking that first step toward fully embracing my independence. I didn't need anyone to approve of my decision or to come with me. This was my journey, and it was time to take it. I booked my flight to California, choosing a small coastal town I had always heard about, and before I knew it, the day arrived. As I boarded the plane, I felt a sense of excitement, but there was also a quiet calm. I wasn't leaving behind any unfinished business. I was simply moving forward. The moment I arrived in California, I felt the shift. The air was different, the pace of life slower, and the ocean, vast and endless, reminded me that I was part of something much bigger than myself. I spent my days exploring the town, walking along the beach, and breathing in the salty air. I met new people, shared stories, and felt a sense of connection that I hadn't realized I was missing. The more I embraced this new chapter, the more I realized how much I had been holding myself back. I had been living in the shadows of my past, letting Rachel's betrayal control my emotions for far too long. Now I was free. I spent a few weeks in California, taking in the beauty of the Pacific coast. It wasn't just the scenic views that left an impact on me, but the way I was seeing myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking for validation from anyone. I was just enjoying my own company, fully content with who I was and where I was going. As I stood on the edge of a cliff, watching the waves crash below, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had taken the first step toward healing, and now I was living my life on my terms. When I returned home, I felt lighter. The trip had been exactly what I needed, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I had let go of the anger, let go of the betrayal, and most importantly, I had let go of the fear. The woman I was before, the one who had been so hurt and afraid, was no longer the person I saw in the mirror. I had become someone new, someone who was proud of what she had overcome. I knew I still had work to do, that there would always be moments where the past tried to creep back in, but I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever been. I had learned how to stand on my own, how to create my own happiness, and how to truly forgive. As I sat at my kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea and looking out at the sun setting behind the trees, I smiled. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The journey had been long, and there had been times when I didn't think I could keep going. But now, I knew that everything I had gone through had been worth it. I was exactly where I was meant to be. It was a few months after my trip to California when I realized that life had a funny way of reminding you that the work of healing was never truly done. As I settled back into my routine, my life felt calmer, more balanced, but there were moments, small moments, when the past would sneak up on me. I would catch myself, for just a second, wondering if Rachel was out there, still trying to manipulate people, still trying to play the victim. It bothered me at first, but then I remembered what I had learned. I couldn't control Rachel, or anyone else for that matter. I could only control myself. And what mattered was how I chose to live now, not how anyone else chose to live. I had come a long way since the day I found out about her betrayal, and I wasn't about to let any lingering thoughts or fears ruin the progress I had made. I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece, and I was proud of who I had become. One afternoon, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee when I received a call from an old friend. It was Karen, the woman I had met during my trip to California. She had been such a breath of fresh air during those few weeks, and I had often thought about her since. "Maggie, I've been thinking about you," Karen said warmly. "I know we haven't talked much since you came back, but I wanted to check in and see how you were doing." I smiled at the sound of her voice. It had been so nice to meet someone who didn't know my past, someone who could see me for who I was now, not who I had been. "I'm doing great, Karen. Thank you for calling," I said, feeling a sense of calm settle over me. "I've been keeping busy, just enjoying the quiet." "I'm glad to hear that. I was hoping you'd be interested in something. I'm putting together a group of people for a retreat next month, and I thought you might like to join us. It's all about self-care and personal growth. I remember you talking about how much you've been through, and I thought it might be something that would really help you." At first, I was hesitant. I had just gotten back to my normal life, and the idea of a retreat seemed like it would be too much too soon. But something about the invitation felt right. Maybe it was time to take another step forward, to continue growing. "That sounds amazing," I said. "I've been focused so much on moving forward, I hadn't really taken the time to invest in myself in other ways. I think it's exactly what I need." And so, the next month, I found myself at a beautiful retreat center tucked away in the mountains. The space was peaceful and serene, surrounded by trees and the sound of birds. It was everything I had hoped for and more. The first day, we had a group session where we shared our stories, our struggles, and our hopes for the future. It was the first time I had ever really talked about everything with a group of strangers, and it felt liberating. Everyone there was on their own journey of healing, and in that space, I didn't feel judged. I felt understood. Over the next few days, I learned how to meditate, how to be present, and how to let go of the baggage I had been carrying for so long. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. Each morning, I would wake up early, walk outside, and breathe in the fresh mountain air. It felt as though I was reconnecting with a part of myself that I had lost. By the time the retreat ended, I felt like a different person. I wasn't the woman I had been before Rachel's betrayal, and I wasn't the woman I had been when I first started this journey. I was something new, someone stronger, someone who had learned to embrace the peace that came with truly letting go. As I left the retreat and drove back home, I realized that the work of healing was never truly over. It was a journey, a path that I would continue walking for the rest of my life. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. I had found my strength. I had found my peace. And I had learned that, no matter what happened, I could always move forward. It had been a few weeks since the retreat, and life had taken on a new rhythm. There were still moments when I would pause, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of my journey, but these moments were different now. I no longer saw them as setbacks. They were reminders, gentle nudges that I had come so far and had built something new within myself. The quietness of my days no longer felt empty. Instead, I embraced the silence, knowing it was a space I had created for my own peace. I had learned that stillness wasn't something to fear. It was a space where I could reflect, breathe, and continue healing. I had been on a path of self-discovery for months now, and while there were still questions left unanswered, I had learned to live with uncertainty. Not everything needed to be figured out. Not everything needed to be perfect. Life, I was learning, was about embracing the journey, not waiting for an end. The weekend after the retreat, I decided to take a trip to the local farmer's market. I had spent so much time alone in my thoughts that I realized I needed to reconnect with the world around me. As I strolled through the market, something about the vibrant colors and the lively chatter of the vendors and shoppers filled me with a sense of calm. It was as if the world had been waiting for me to step back into it. And in that moment, I felt alive, present, and at peace with myself. I walked past the fruit stands, the flowers, and the homemade goods, taking in the sweet smells and the warmth of the sun on my face. And as I passed by the artisan bread stand, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Karen, the woman I had met at the retreat. She was standing with a basket of fresh produce, chatting with a vendor. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile. "Maggie," she called, waving me over. I smiled back and walked toward her. "Karen, it's so good to see you," I said. We exchanged pleasantries before Karen asked, "How have you been? How's everything going?" I paused, taking a moment to reflect. "It's been really good, actually. I feel like I'm finally starting to find my rhythm again. The retreat helped a lot. I've been focusing on myself, and it's been exactly what I needed." Karen nodded knowingly, her eyes warm with understanding. "I'm so happy to hear that. It's amazing what taking time for yourself can do. It's like everything just falls into place once you make that decision to prioritize yourself." We spent the next few minutes chatting about life, about the changes we had both been making, and about the lessons we had learned along the way. I realized how much I had appreciated this conversation. It wasn't just the friendly banter. It was the way Karen saw me, completely and unapologetically as I was now. It felt refreshing to be seen like that, without any expectations or judgments. After we said our goodbyes, I continued my walk through the market, but this time with a new sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the people I had met along the way, for the lessons that life had taught me, and for the opportunity to start over, in a sense. I had faced betrayal, hurt, and loss, but I had also found new strength, new friendships, and a deeper understanding of myself. Life had a way of surprising you, of offering you exactly what you needed when you least expected it. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Later that evening, as I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, the sun setting in the distance, I realized how much I had changed. I had come so far from the person I had been a year ago. I had taken back my peace, my trust in myself, and my ability to move forward. I wasn't defined by the past, by Rachel's betrayal, or by the pain I had felt. I was defined by how I chose to live now, by the choices I made every day to continue growing, learning, and living fully. The journey wasn't over. It never would be. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready for whatever the future had in store, knowing that I had the strength and the wisdom to handle whatever came my way.